From Reason Alliance Media, this is Season 1, Episode 10, The Con of Reason. I'm Bella Constrictor, standing in for Miss Behaven, who is recovering from our awesome weekend at ReAsonCon. On this week's episode, you're going to hear Maura Borshuns interview a representative from the 1 in 3 campaign. And then, Bella and Frida are going to talk about this week's 2 Trumps and a puppy, admittedly more puppy than Trump. And we're going to close out the episode with Frida and her reflections on ReAsonCon. So let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, thanks for joining us. My name is Maura Borshuns, and I'm joined today by Julia Redeker-Flynn. She's the director of the 1 in 3 campaign. Julia, do you want to tell us a little bit about what that campaign is? You guys interviewed me not long ago about my abortion story, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share that. Can you talk a little bit about how that got started and the mission that you all have?
Sure, and thanks so much for having me. It's really exciting that you all are doing this. So we started the 1 in 3 campaign in 2011. And there was a few things happening at the time. One of the things that we were seeing was a number of anti-choice pieces of legislation popping up at the state level and really fast and furious ways. And as an organization, we had always supported access to abortion and supported young people's access to abortion, but hadn't necessarily been seen as sort of vocally taking that stance and being really bold about our support. So we were thinking it was time. The impact on young people was really dramatic, and we've continued to see the anti-abortion legislation popping up in states ever since then. So we felt like there was definitely a need and an urgency to be really vocal and bold in our support of abortion access. At the same time, we were also really inspired by a number of movements and social justice movements who are doing incredible work and continue to do incredible work to shift culture as part to create more. So we were really looking at the young activists who are dreamers and were really coming out as undocumented and sharing their stories publicly and taking huge risks, and at the same time really changing the narrative in this country from language that often was dehumanizing, like using aliens, and to shifting it to undocumented people, to shifting it to your classmates, your friends, your coworkers, and turning an issue into part of people's lives. And at the same time, we were seeing very similar trends within the LGBT movement of people sharing their own experiences, talking openly about who they were, and again, seeing major trends in changing the culture and seeing LGBT is no longer an issue, but as people in our lives, our friends, our coworkers. And we thought, there might be a possibility to think about abortion in a similar way. For so long, when people said the word abortion, really 2 cultural images came to people's mind. Either those graphic fetus images that often are being carried by anti-choice protesters, or politicians protesting, or people protesting, usually older white people protesting, or politicians sort of dehumanizing people. And what we thought is that maybe it was possible to change this and to have people think about abortion as really an experience in people's lives, and to think about ourselves and our friends and our sisters and our coworkers, and to humanize an issue in order to change the culture, to build more empathy and support for people who have abortions, and also for abortion access, and ultimately also to shift and stop some of these policies and create a vocal support for abortion access, and to end the stigma around abortion. So that was the goal, and we started back in 2011. We started with really just our coworkers and our, the very first 5 stories we collected were all staff and advocates, and And from there, it's really been an incredible journey to build out. And now over 1,300 people have shared their abortion stories with the campaign, whether it's online or written or a video or on a podcast. And it's been a really incredible experience to witness and to see sort of people make this campaign their own and to bring their own voices and center the voices of those who've had abortion in the conversation around abortion access.
That's awesome. And it's interesting how you mentioned the other social justice movements and how they've used storytelling to kind of humanize other issues, how we've done that with LGBTQ rights movement. And I was just showing a video that I found on YouTube to some friends of mine, and it was about Latinx people coming out as LGBTQ and their experiences with that. And there were people from all different cultures in the room, but they had that LGBTQ experience, and people were starting to get all teary-eyed and recognizing that these experiences exist across different cultures and different backgrounds, and they're very similar. So I think that's really a powerful tool. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of the responses that you've gotten and why you think storytelling is so powerful in movements like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a couple reasons why storytelling, and just as what you said, I mean, one of the reasons is that when people share, their a piece about their life, about who they are, and it can be really powerful for a couple of reasons. One, sharing a piece about who you are, about what matters to you, storytelling really has the power to allow us to understand sort of the complexity of our own life, but also the other people's lives. And so by hearing what someone else experienced, you might be able to say, oh, I experienced something similar, or I haven't experiencing something similar, but I can understand the emotions and the experiences that that person is going through. So I think it can be a really powerful way to really understand an issue, but also to understand other people's lives. As I mentioned earlier, one of the ways that one of the things that we've seen is really powerful is when people share their stories, they create space for other people to share their stories. And, often as people, even when I talk about working on this campaign, many people have come up to me and sort of shared their personal experiences with abortion or with even other reproductive health issues. And it creates an opening for others. And one of the stories that I always hear very often is people were really afraid to share their story with anyone. And then they share it with a close friend or with their parent. And their parent turns to them and said, I also had an abortion. And I've never told someone about that. So I think it's an incredible, it's a really powerful way to break down some of those barriers and to bring more people into community. And to be able to really listen and hear about other people's lives. I think another thing about it is that people often feel isolated. The shame and stigma has really been a tool to isolate and silence people who had abortion. And that, is really, that can be overwhelming. And I think when people create spaces to talk authentically about their lives, that we can break down that stigma and create communities and build support for others. I think third is that we really do shape our values through our own lived experiences, but also our ability to empathize with other people's experiences. And so by hearing people's stories, you might be able to relate to a piece of it, but you also might be able to empathize with another person's experience. And we've found sometimes when only one story is told, people judge that person. So, if one person alone shares their abortion story, people might say, oh, well, she should have used birth control, or she should have planned better, or, many sort of stigmatizing and judgmental language. But what we've seen is when multiple people, there's spaces created for multiple people to share their stories and uplift many voices, that it encourages listeners and others to take a step back and really think about, wow, these are experiences that I had not thought about, or these are experiences that I can relate to in different ways. And I really shouldn't be judging. And I think that's the goal, is one of the goals is to tell people, move from a place of judgment and stigma to empathy. And then, of course, one of the main goals is also just to strengthen support for abortion access. And we've seen through some of our research and some of our advocacy that storytelling has the potential of strengthening support for abortion access, which is really important for us as well.
Yeah, there's always that tendency for people in the abortion debates to say, well, what about in cases of rape or incest, or, what if, this particular situation or that one? And a lot of people who don't support abortion will make those exceptions. And so I think that's a really important point that you've touched on, is that the more stories you collect, the more exceptions to the rules, or to that belief that you can pull out real lived experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes, unfortunately, as a movement, we might have only highlighted particular stories that we felt would really sway someone. And often there are cases of rape or incest or life endangerment. And I think what's important for this campaign and for all campaigns is that we want to elevate multiple experiences, because, I think you're right, people are hearing that and then they're making exceptions for those cases because that swayed them and thinking, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I think with multiple stories, you start to see it's really hard to make those, for you as an outsider to judge what is the best decision for that person as you start hearing these complex stories. Can you really say, oh, well, at this many weeks, that's the right decision? And I think what we're hoping people realize is that it really needs to be, the decision needs to rest in the hands of the person who's making the decision and their life. And they're the most equipped to make that decision. And I think when you hear multiple stories and different perspectives, you're able to sort of understand that and really say, you know what, I can't make that judgment for other people. I gotta trust people to make the right decision for themselves.
Right. And there's also the opportunity that, the more stories you collect, you're also going to eventually have a story that a listener, any listener could tune in and say, wait, that could be me. So whether they've had that experience and they've not shared it, to let them know that they're not alone.
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
If they have not had an abortion, they haven't had experience, to have someone who has had a very similar background to them to tell their abortion story. I think the more variety in the stories that you get, the more likely listeners are to be able to identify with some of those. And so I really appreciate it. So it's 1 in 3 women will need an abortion, or 1 in 3 women will have an abortion?
Yeah, so it's a good question. The statistic has slightly changed since we launched the campaign. So now it's about nearly 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her life. So it's a little bit fewer than 1 in 3, but still pretty close. They're still compiling the data as of now to update it, but it's pretty close. A little bit below 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her lifetime.
There's an interesting statistic I just found out. I'm in Alabama, and they consistently refuse to teach sex ed in high schools, or they just don't teach medically, scientifically accurate information. They just When I was in high school, they told us, don't have sex or you'll get pregnant. And they didn't teach us anything about STIs or how a condom works or any kind of prevention methods whatsoever. They just said, don't do it. Just abstinence. That's it. And they like to present data that could make it look like that works. And so one of the things I just realized is when they talk about in Alabama that our abortion rates are going down or that our teen pregnancy rates are going down, I just noticed that they're only counting ages 15 to 19 as teen pregnancy in the teen pregnancy calculations, whereas the majority of the rest of the states count 10 to 19, I think. And so it's, our teen pregnancy rates are just lower. They're just so much lower than the rest of the country, when in reality they're a lot higher. So it's always important to recognize that, it always takes a long time to verify and clean data and publish it. So we're always going to be a couple of years behind, but to look at those numbers and just realize what age range did they pull that from? And, is it, when they say, is it 1 per 10,000? Is that what is their measurement? Because every state does it differently. And so in some states, especially here in the Bible Belt, will present it in whatever way makes it look like their abstinence education is working. And so, but yeah, I do like to remind people the 1 in 3 is pretty much nationwide, right?
Yeah. And, yes, the data, one of the great sources to look for data around reproductive health is the Guttmacher Institute. And they, do a really comprehensive job at looking at data around sex education and birth control and abortion access. Another really great, data source is the Center for Disease Control. They do an abortion surveillance every 10 years. Yeah, it is really critical to sort of understand who's presenting the data and what they might be, why they might be elevating certain data. But yeah, for us, the Guttmacher Institute has really been one of the gold standards of understanding, the percentages of people accessing abortion, and the data that came from was it's about what was current in 2011, and we're still waiting for more current data to come out. But what for me the bottom line is it's very common experience. Whether it becomes 1 in 3 or 1 in 3.5, people are pretty surprised that if 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in their lifetime, you will know someone who's had an abortion, and really everyone would know someone. And I think that's one of the takeaways is to really be, to recognize that abortion is a very common experience. It's a very common medical procedure, and it directly impacts many people in our lives. And so I think when people think, oh, I don't know if I should talk about abortion access, or it's controversial. Is it controversial? Because really it is impacting definitely people in your community, and it definitely is impacting people's lives. And so I think, having honest conversations, you should walk into every room assuming someone in that room has had an abortion if there's more than 3 people or 3 women. So I think that that's, for me, an important thing to remember, because there's so much silence and stigma around it that one of the things that the statistic, which might lower slightly, is still important to remember that this is a very common experience, and you want to be treating people with, it shouldn't be seen as abnormal. It should be seen as pretty common, and we should go in expecting people in our lives to have had that experience.
So one of the things that I actually found from the Guttmacher Institute was I actually just did my thesis for my master's in public administration. So I just was looking into the Hyde Amendment and all of these trap laws and why is it so hard to get an abortion? And one of the things I found was it was kind of buried in the statistics in the results of another study. So it wasn't the purpose of the study. It was just like one line. They said that the majority of women, a lot of people who oppose abortion oppose it because I think women will regret our decisions or that we don't know what we're doing. And that feeds into the stigma a lot, especially when we don't talk about it. But what I found in this study and in a couple of others that mentioned it was that there's not regret so much as there's stigma, and the stigma causes people to feel shame. When you feel like you can't talk about it and you can't share your story, and you're probably the only one who's ever done this, and no one you know has had that experience, and that you should be ashamed and that you're singled out, and it's something that's shameful that we don't talk about. And so telling stories is just, to me, one of the most powerful things, especially for me. It was therapeutic. It's been very therapeutic just to be able to talk openly, and to know that I'm not the only person. Like, we have to cut these stories down to 4 minutes because there's so many people who want to share their stories. That's just really, really powerful to know that I'm not alone, and not only am I not alone, but other people want to listen to my story. Other people want to hear what I have to say, and no one is judging me, and we're just bringing that out into the open. Because another one of the issues is there's a trap law here in Alabama and in a lot of southern states that you have to have this mandatory counseling. I would put counseling in air quotes. But it's not counseling, it's a state-mandated script that the provider has to read to the patient, and it contains a lot of inaccurate information, like abortion causes breast cancer. That is not true. And a lot of women, because of all the stigma, because of the thing that's put on us for this decision that we do not regret, a lot of us could have probably used some real counseling, but to work through that. But because that's not part of the process, it's the state-mandated script and this waiting period to remind you that you probably don't know how to make a decision on your own. And then all of this stigma and shame and silencing. And so what you all are doing with 1 in 3 is so important. It's bringing something that is historically just been shamed and shut up in the closet and shoved under the rug and not talked about, and bringing it out into the light and putting a face to it, and putting faces and voices to it, and saying, like, these are your neighbors, these are people that we know. And if 1 in 3 of us have had or will have an abortion, we need to stop stigmatizing it, because someone that you know and love is dealing with that experience, or has dealt with and has had that experience, and does not need your judgment piled on top of them, because that is not an unplanned pregnancy, is not a fun experience no matter how it turns out, right? So I really, really appreciate that, and I can't thank you all enough.
Yeah, I can't say it better than that. I think that is really what we hope for and what the goal is. And I know that definitely some people might experience some backlash for telling stories. So, I don't want to minimize that, but I think, what you're speaking to of building this space, and people are interested and excited to share their story. We had a speak out the other week, and we said, we were letting a storyteller know that this was being picked up by, her story was being picked up by a group called Now This, and or something like that. And we were like, this is going to probably have large audience. We don't know which side people will fall on, but we just wanted to give you a heads up. And she was like, I am all in. I feel so ready to share this story. And if it could make someone's life easier out there, then I will feel accomplished. And I think we hear that over and over again from people who share their stories, because we know it is a risk, and we know that they are, together building and shaping a culture that we want to see, and facing stigma and continuing to share their stories and change the culture. And in the process, it's been pretty remarkable to watch people's sort of willingness to do this, and also what it means for other people to hear them and to hear their stories, and to feel less alone, and to feel part of something bigger. So that's definitely one of the goals of the campaign.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I know that the other piece to this is that you all are doing the pop-up art campaigns. Can you talk a little bit about that? I signed up to host one here in Alabama, so I'll be letting you know how that goes.
Awesome. Yeah, so we work, with a lot of, one of our goals at Advocates for Youth is really to support young leaders as they are advocating for abortion access across the country. And one of the ways that we do this is we train young people in sort of how to lead conversations around abortion access, and we support them in speaking up and speaking to media. And we always are looking at ways to provide often students and young people new tools to break open this conversation in their community, which can be sort of a nerve-wracking thing to do for the first time. So the pop-up art, activism, we're really excited. We had over 100, mostly students, sign up to get this pop-up art display. It will feature stories from the 1 in 3 campaign on large removable wallpapers, and people can plaster them. Students have in the past plastered them in the center of their quad or in the lunchroom, or people have cut them out and put them in bathroom stalls and put them all over in the community. And one of the goals is really to create a visual and artistic way and fun way for young people to bring this conversation to their community. And one of the exciting sort of stories last time is we had a student who put it up, and then it sparked a conversation. People were talking about the statistic, and it sparked a conversation in her math class about the statistic, but then also about abortion access. And it was, and that was really exciting to us, because part of the goal is to bring the conversation sort of out of the typical political spheres or out of the typical debate spheres and bring it to people's lives. And so the fact that people were having a conversation about abortion in a math class was, really exciting to us. And again, trying to limit and reduce the stigma and be bringing conversation. So it's supposed to be a creative and eye-catching way that, whether you have art skills or not, can put up these displays in your community, on your campus, and then have conversations with people about what abortion access looks like in your own community, and maybe even add your own stories to the displays next year. So that's what, and it's happening this year, next week, the 17th through the 21st. So we'll definitely be watching and following as people put these displays up all over the country. Right now we have over 100 people doing it, so it should be pretty fun.
That's awesome. And that's a cool way for people who may not be able to share their own stories to share someone else's story, right? So anonymizing some of those tools so that some people in states like Alabama, where they might fear repercussions, we don't have to all share our stories, and it really is important to think of safety first. So we talk about that a lot with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be a way to, it might create a space for people to share their stories that, isn't necessarily on a media campaign, but it might, what we keep seeing is bringing stories to new spaces opens the door for other people to share their stories. And so it might create a space for someone who hasn't previously shared their story to at least, again, read other stories that are up in their community and know that there's people in their community that believe, that they should have access to abortion and support them. So I think, creating ways for people to visually and out loud declare their support is really important for us as well.
That's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. And is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners about how they can get involved in the fight for reproductive justice and how they can help your mission?
Yeah, so if you are, we're actually recruiting young leaders. So if any of your listeners are between 15 and 24 and they're interested in, learning more about sexual and reproductive health and advocacy around reproductive justice, and we're recruiting young people, and we love to have as many young people from the South as possible be part of our program. So definitely apply. And right now the applications are open. They're actually at amplifyyourvoice.org under the youth programs. And one of the campaigns is the 1 in 3 campaign, but we also have campaigns and programs that are open to young people who are interested in doing this work around LGBT rights, or interested in doing this work from a young woman of color leadership council perspective. And so for all of those reasons, we would love to support young leaders from the South doing this incredible work. So definitely check us out for that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Julia Rittaker Flynn, thanks for coming on PSF.
Thank you so much, Maura. It's great to be here.
Misbehavin' here, and I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who participated in PSF's silent auction at our table at ReAsonCon 3. We were raising money for the Powerhouse. 50% of the auction's proceeds will go to the Powerhouse, and 50% will go toward helping offset the costs of PSF coming to ReAsonCon. And the Powerhouse, otherwise known as POWER House, which stands for People Organizing for Women's Empowerment and Rights House, is a historical multi-use building that houses the offices of Montgomery Area Reproductive Justice Coalition and serves the patients of Reproductive Health Services, Montgomery's only abortion clinic. That is done in several ways. They offer clinic escort services for the patients of that clinic. The Powerhouse is available to patients to take a break from waiting inside of the clinic and to offer a shield between patients and the protesters. So that is a great cause that we wanted to help out. And as you may know, Maura Borshuns, one of our correspondents, frequently works with and volunteers with the Powerhouse. So we wanted to thank everyone and also let you know how much was earned. So the total that was earned at that table was a staggering $275. Thank you so much for participating, everybody. We really appreciate the help, and we look forward to doing these sorts of fundraising things in the future. Hopefully, maybe even our own feminist fundraise-a-thon in the future.
As you may know, millions of people face negative news every day. We also face negative facts. But thankfully, puppies exist. PSF's current events segment will feature 2 articles that are quote-unquote Trumps, and 1 news article that is a quote-unquote puppy, meant to brighten your spirits and keep you going through the next week. So this week's 2 Trumps and a Puppy is going to be a little bit on the lighthearted side. I'm Bella Constrictor, and with me is Frida Nipple. Hello. Our first story today comes from The Friendly Atheist, and I just couldn't resist talking about this because it's just the funniest thing. The headline that Hemant Mehta came up with for his post is probably the best description ever. It's this is the saddest Planned Parenthood protest I've ever seen. So back in February, Pastor Greg Locke posted a video on Facebook titled "Planned Parenthood Sent Me a Personal Thank You and It Has Me Lit," where he basically rails about the fact that you can actually donate to Planned Parenthood in the name of somebody else, and they will send that somebody a thank you note. So that particular video back in February went viral and basically started a flood of donations to Planned Parenthood in his name.
I could not resist just knowing that he would get one more letter. So I did the minimum donation, and even though I'm totally short on cash, it was worth it.
Yeah, no doubt. So he got thousands of letters, and he got sent other things apparently, like dildos and things like that, just from people who wanted to, what is that word?
Troll.
Yeah, basically. So what he decided to do was to take all of these letters and travel to a major Planned Parenthood location and hand deliver and return these thank you letters to Planned Parenthood. And I believe it was yesterday, or maybe the day before yesterday, he actually, had a live Facebook video going on, and I was watching it, where he came to Planned Parenthood and he went to the one in D.C., because it's, I guess, their most expensive building. And he was met at the door by the Planned Parenthood guards, and they were like, hey, we've totally been expecting you. You cannot come inside, but here's some trash cans for your letters. And his protest was basically him giving a little speech and then walking. Nobody was staring there. There, you can see in the background of the video, there's escorts, like Planned Parenthood escorts, and they're completely ignoring him. It's just him and his video person, and he opens his suitcase and puts some letters in a trash can and then walks away. Hemet says, some people protest by setting themselves on fire. Others protest by organizing large nationwide marches to raise awareness of an issue. But Greg Locke protests by buying a plane ticket, staying in a hotel, and then dumping the contents of a suitcase into a couple of recycling bins. #courage.
Just, I'm going to protest. Let's recycle.
Yeah, I wonder what he was actually planning on doing with the letters if he had been allowed to come inside the building. I don't get the feeling that he was planning on causing, a scene. He, other than being not really thinking through his plans and being closed-minded, he doesn't really strike me as a fire and brimstone. I'm gonna yell at patrons in this hospital. You know what I mean? I don't think that was his plan. But I kind of wonder what he would have planned to do. He did, in the video, do a little "they kill babies and we believe in God" speech beforehand. But apparently he referred to the protest as anticlimactic at one point. We're getting to him.
I do believe we are. There were actually, there was the initial video that he was lit, and then he got his first round of letters, and he made another video saying, you guys should, stop doing this, and I'm getting all of this stuff. And it was in that video that he had announced that he was going to protest. It sounded like he was going to have other church members with him there as well. So I was thinking it would be something more like a number of his congregants and the normal anti-choice people with, signs about babies and that sort of stuff. But I find this so funny, and I love that people are donating to an important charity because he's an idiot.
So this form of passive-aggressive activism is still going on. He posted this video, he returned all the letters, so we'd really like for him to have letters when he gets home, so to speak. So we will go ahead and in the show notes put his address. It's actually the address to his church, it's not his personal address. Yeah, so our next story is also a little bit more on the political side, but it's an opinion piece on CNN by Jen. Ooh, I'm going to mispronounce this name. Psaki, I guess? I'm assuming the P is silent. It's titled, Women Should Scare the Heck Out of Trump. I'm going to go ahead and change that to Women Should Scare the Hell Out of Trump. So it starts off saying, while the world is focusing this weekend on the end of the first 100 days of Donald Trump's presidency, there's one more vital milestone to mark. This past Sunday marks 100 days since the Women's March. And the organizers of the Women's March really deserve credit for tapping into something, a nervous energy, a need to do something. Now we're moving forward, and it's the women who have become citizen activists in a way. We have become the backbone of the resistance. I don't know, it really does seem like every time a politician or somebody tries to cut down some right or put in some bill into action that sort of takes away the rights of women or marginalized peoples, they get shut down really quickly these days. And I think that this Jen is right, or the writer of this opinion piece is correct in assuming that that has a lot to do with this fire that we started at the beginning of this election cycle. Does that make sense?
It does, and I really really think that with our current presidency and the popularity of the Women's March, that it's woken people up more and that more of us are paying attention to what's going on than we have in previous years.
Right, exactly. Outlined in this article, it says women have organized postcard writing campaigns against nominations. They've sent countless letters to editors after reinstatements. Women have showed up at town hall meetings to question their members of Congress. We express outrage when the Vice President, Mike Pence, cast the tie-breaking vote to allow the Republican Senate to undermine access to birth control. It says, while the prospect of electing the first female president apparently didn't get enough women to vote the way many of us anticipated, the systematic effort by the Trump team to roll back protections for women's health and for equality in the workplace has. One final statement that I think is really powerful that she wrote she says, you cannot say you are fighting, speaking about, the politicians in general, you cannot say you are fighting for women's economic empowerment, but then impose a woman's ability to choose when or whether she has children. You cannot say you're fighting for a woman to participate fully in the economy and then not fight for access to affordable birth control, childcare, or paid family leave. A true fight for economic empowerment would not leave women behind. And this is not just about a Republican in the White House. The Democratic Party has some work to do as well. That's definitely something we need to make sure that we keep pushing and keep up this activism, even though it's exhausting, I know, because I'm a bad activist to begin with, so this whole fight has been difficult for me. So one big thing, I think, would be that, to turn the tide, Democrats don't need to run from, say, reproductive rights issues, and they need to show voters what's at stake in Trump's America, and that's what American women are doing right now in record numbers. So hopefully our politicians take note of that and follow suit.
So I think now's the good time for the puppy?
Oh, yeah, definitely, although I think this has been a pretty good segment so far. No one's feeling depressed, but just in case anybody is, we've got a puppy for you.
There is a drug that's been around for about 50 years. It's called tranexamic acid, abbreviated as TXA, and it's been discovered to save women after childbirth. So it works by stopping blood clots from breaking down. There was a global trial of 20,000 women that found that death due to bleeding was reduced by 31% if the treatment was given within 3 hours. Severe bleeding after childbirth, known as postpartum hemorrhaging, is the leading cause of maternal death worldwide. So more than 100,000 women globally die each year from the condition. The study consisted of 193 hospitals in 21 countries, mainly in Africa and Asia, but also in the UK and other places. The results show that the women giving the acid within the 3 hours, that 89 died from bleeding, compared to 127 given the placebo in addition to standard care. So they did do the scientific study with the double-blind testing. The researchers found that there's no side effects from the drug to either mothers or children, and the findings provide the first comprehensive evidence on using tranexamic acid for postpartum hemorrhage. It's safe and affordable and easy to administer, and the people from the study hope that doctors will be able to use it as early as possible to help stop the postpartum hemorrhaging.
So that's awesome. It's nice that so this drug was used for other things and they just now discovered that it can be used?
According to the article, it was the researchers who invented TXA more than 50 years ago hoped that it would reduce deaths from postpartum hemorrhage, but they couldn't persuade obstetricians at the time to conduct a trial. So now that we have these results, we can actually apply them. And that's paraphrasing on my part.
Oh, no, that's okay. Paraphrasing's our friend. Well, that's great. I wonder why it took so long for them to get, like, the testing they needed. It's not like there aren't thousands of babies born every single day.
Right. Well, the article states that postpartum hemorrhage is most prevalent in low and middle income countries. So, it's not as high as a priority for people to look out for them.
Sure, we will definitely have links to all of our articles in the show notes. So I guess that does it for our segment today. Hope you guys all enjoyed your two Trumps and a puppy, and I'll see you on the other side of the interstitial music.
Sounds good. Bye, folks. Hi everyone, Frida here. So, I got home from ReAsonCon about an hour ago. I had such a good time. I wasn't sure what to expect. There were some hiccups and bothersome things that happened. And despite them, I had an amazing time. To understand just how meaningful ReAsonCon was for me, I'll tell you part of my history. A field trip, as it were. I was raised Catholic, and in the infinite wisdom of a 12-year-old, I turned away from the Catholic Church and became pagan. Though with being pagan, there were some things that I didn't believe, even from the get-go. Like picking a pantheon, which a pantheon is just a fancy name for a tradition. So if you follow Greek gods or Roman, Egyptian, whatever. Or star charts. Like, in order for this spell to work, the moon must be waning and Saturn must be in the proper place in the night sky. What the fuck does it matter where the stars are? If a spell is supposed to be like an intense prayer, and you're putting energy into this action and asking divinity to accept your request, that's your spell, why does it matter where the stars are? It never made sense. My paganism devolved over time. So, I had at one point believed that different crystals had different properties. After I figured out that a rock is a rock, those went out the window as well. For a time, I was a solitary practitioner. But it turns out that playing pretend by yourself, well, for me it just made me feel silly. I ended up stripping away most of the woo and settled on what I referred to as a simple prayer life, where I believed in some of the basics of paganism like reincarnation, the rule of 3, which is whatever you do, it'll come back to you 3 times. I believed in a god and goddess and just kind of prayed, and that was religion for me. Though I still attended an event called Pagan Spirit Gathering, which is a week-long festival, and it felt like home to me. It was affirming and supportive despite this. Though I still attended an event called Pagan Spirit Gathering. It's a week-long festival, and it felt like home. It was affirming and supportive despite the plethora of woo there. 2 examples, because they're just so ridiculous. I love to tell these stories. So the first one is that I went to a Reiki workshop. I was curious because I had heard about it, but I never really knew what it was. And after the workshop, the people running it offered a festival special. For just $150 instead of their regular $200, we could get our chakras opened, and that way we could be Reiki specialists too. I immediately acknowledged to myself that this was bullshit. So I looked at the people who were running it and I said, there are books on this, right? And I think it was a husband and wife, and the wife looked at me and she's like, well, yes. Okay, well, I'll think about it, and then if I want to do it, I'm just going to buy a book. And she, oh, no, wait. So, you could do the book, but it's going to take some intense meditation, and your chakras will slowly open, and if you do it with us, we'll be able to help you through the process. It'll go a lot faster, and you'll be stronger, and such a fucking scam. And there were two of my friends that actually paid them for it. The second one is there was a divination workshop with some sort of mancy, I forget which one. So, like, tetramancy or pyromancy, but this was basically being able to tell an object's history that you can intuit by holding and meditating on the object. And there was a group of us and several objects that we each got to cycle through and hold and figure out what we could intuit from holding it for a while and closing our eyes. So there was one in particular that I got. It was a white clay vase with geometric patterns on it. And when it was my turn to give feedback for it, I said, well, it was made in Mexico. And the presenter looked at me. How could you possibly know that? And I held up the vase, because it says made in Mexico on the bottom. They were so focused on, what can our minds figure out? But instead of looking at the actual physical clues for an object, maybe like, an appraiser might do, or whatever. Just she had the thing for years and never thought to look at the bottom. So it's been maybe 5 years since I've been to Pagan Spirit Gathering, and only the past 2 years that I've realized came to be an atheist. And with the convention, yes, there were some snafus. I was running low on my mental health energy, or spoons as they're referred to. I had lack of sleep, and travel plans didn't work quite right, but overall it was amazing. For the first time in 5 years, I was surrounded by community that understands me. And for the first time ever, I knew that the conversations that I would have were about things that are actually real. The people there care about making a difference. They question, educate, support, and listen to each other. I had a hard time leaving the party on Saturday night. I was in tears because I realized how much the community means to me and how much I need it in my life. And to face the fact that leaving ReAsonCon meant that I didn't know the next time that I would get to have that same experience again. That's what really made it hard to go. So I thank everyone who attended ReAsonCon. I thank everyone who listens to the podcast. I thank Miss B for this opportunity to share my voice and make a difference. I don't know if words can properly convey how much I appreciate how far I've come in my life right now. Thank you, and be well.
And that about does it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We'll be back next week. We promise. We're sorry this week's was a little bit late, but that is because ReAsonCon had us all traveling from different states so that we could meet each other in person for the first time. From the Promoting Secular Feminism crew to you, thank you, and have a great week.